Welcome to part 2, where I am reading chapter 18 of 1 Samuel. The following events that happen after Samuel defeats Goliath, or David defeats Goliath in the Old Testament of the Bible. Part 1, check that one out first. Bring more context to this, but this is part 2. Like I said, part 1, I go to church every Sunday, and I'm starting to take what I learned in church and turn it into a video and kind of expand on it a little bit more than the context what church gives, and like learn a bit more about it, even for my own self, because what I took from church, after I'd heard this, I was like, what's the aftermath? Like, there's more to this reading that I want to hear and I need to explore and find out in comparison to what my pastor just says. Reading the initial and famous story of David and Goliath, which I read in part 1. Now we're into part 2, expanding more onto it. And I also forgot to mention, so I'm reading the English Standard Version of the Bible. There are many different versions of the Bible. I have another version of it right here called the New International Version from right there. And let me show you guys my other Bibles. I have other videos where I explain my collections. But as you can see right here, I got like children's versions. I got history versions. I got a Catholic hymnal right there. Luther's Catechism class that I took with my church because I'm Lutheran. And here's a bunch more Bibles, different versions. And then this is another one that's really complex and stuff, but it's also just a great thing to have for my collection. If you weren't aware. Yeah, and let's continue. So this part starts off with David and Jonathan's friendship. So I haven't really learned about Jonathan yet, but we'll see what it talks about here. As soon as he had finished speaking to Saul, the soul of Jonathan was knit to the soul of David, and Jonathan loved him as his own soul. And Saul took him that day and would not let him return to his father's house. Then Jonathan made a covenant with David because he loved him as his own soul. And Jonathan stripped himself of the robe that was on him and gave it to David and his armor and even his sword and his bow and his belt. And David went out and was successful wherever Saul sent him, so that Saul sent him over the men of war. And this was good in the sight of all the people and also in the sight of Saul's servants. Interesting. So basically this guy Jonathan, he gives all his armor and everything to Saul, or everything to David. And Saul, out of his jealousy of David, just wants to send him into battle and almost just get him eliminated to some extent. Like, he wants to give him just the toughest of tasks and just see if he survives. I mean, he obviously wants... I don't know if he wants David to survive, but that's what Saul does. He sends him out to go into these battles, and he wins them all. Saul's jealousy of David. As they were coming home, when David returned from striking down the Philistine, the women came out of all cities of Israel, singing and dancing to meet King Saul, with tambourines, with songs of joy, and with musical instruments. Now, I play an instrument, but that's not necessarily the instruments that they're referring to here. From what I can see of the context here, it's talking about like a triangles and 3 stringed instruments. So that's like, I don't think that'd be a harp. I don't know if that'd be a guitar. It's close to a modern day guitar, maybe, but there's probably smaller stringed instruments that only have 3 strings, apparently. Interesting. And the women sang to one another as they celebrated. Saul has struck down his thousands, David his 10,000s. I said this in part 1 because I was already aware of this fact. It's kind of mean. I don't know. I mean, Saul was the leader, and to some extent, he had David come in. He ultimately accepted David to come in and join his army and ultimately do it under God's name. So to some extent, Saul still cared about God, and he knew that it was the right move to add David. Ultimately, in the end, he made the move. So he should still have respect of getting to 10,000. I don't know necessarily why these women sang this song in the celebration. It confuses me a little bit, but I mean, to some extent, you got to give credit to David. He did ultimately do the act, but they were both, I mean, Saul was the leader, so maybe he would have lost if David didn't come in and said the words that he said, but it's hard to say. Let's continue. And Saul was very angry, and this saying displeased him. He said, "They have ascribed to David 10,000s, and to me they have described thousands. And what more can he have but the kingdom?" And Saul eyed David from that day on. Yeah, I mean, another thing is, yeah, his kingdom could get overthrown. Like, David ultimately can become the leader if he gets enough, votes, or however their government worked at this time. So, I mean, you gotta be mad if you're not the most popular person in your town if you want to keep staying as the general and the king and the leader, because this is King Saul. This is where it turns to the worst here. The next day, a harmful spirit from God rushed upon Saul, and he raved within his house while David was playing the lyre, as he did day by day. Saul had his spear in his hand, and Saul hurled the spear, for he thought, "I will pin David to the wall." But David evaded him twice. Saul was afraid of David because the Lord was with him, but had departed from Saul. So Saul removed him from his presence and made him a commander of 1,000. And he went out and came in before the people. And David had success in all his undertaking. The Lord was with him. Yeah, so this is what I was talking about. Like, Saul made David go to these undertakings, go to these battles. And he won them all with the Lord with him. And when Saul saw this, he had great success. He stood in fearful awe of him. But all Israel and Judea loved David, for he went out and came in before them. David marries Michal. I don't know how to say that. Then Saul said to David, "Here is my elder daughter, Merab. I will give her to you for a wife. Only be valiant for me and fight the Lord's battles." For Saul thought, "Let not my hand be against him, but let the hand of the Philistines be against him." And David said to Saul, "Who am I? And who are my relatives, my father's clan in Israel, that I should be son-in-law to the king?" But at the time when Merab, Saul's daughter, should have been given to David, she was given to Adriel, the Meholathite, for a wife. I don't know what that means. Now Saul's daughter, Michal, loved David. And they told Saul, and the thing pleased him. Saul thought, "Let me give her to him, that she may be a snare for him, and that the hand of the Philistines may be against him." Therefore Saul said to David a second time, "You shall now be my son-in-law." And Saul commanded his servants, "Speak to David in private and say, 'Behold, the king has delight in you, and all his servants love you.'" Now then became the king's son-in-law. And Saul's servants spoke these words in the ears of David. And David said, "Does it seem to you a little thing to become the king's son-in-law, since I am a poor man and have no reputation?" And the servants of Saul told him thus, and so did David speak. Then Saul said, "Thus shall you say to David, the king desires no bride price except 100 foreskins of the Philistines, that he may be avenged the king's enemies." I don't necessarily have anything to talk about here. I just want to say I've been pausing the video a little bit just because there's like noises, people, my family's walking around the house and stuff. So if I'm making weird cutbacks in and out while reading this, that's why. But let's continue. Now Saul thought to make David fall by the hand of the Philistines. And when his servants told David these words, it pleased David well to be the king's son-in-law before the time had expired. David arose and went along with his men, and killed 200 of the Philistines. And David brought their foreskins, which were given in full number, to the king, that he might become the king's son-in-law. And Saul gave him his daughter, Michal for a wife. But when Saul saw and knew the Lord was with David, and that Michal, Saul's daughter, loved him, Saul was even more afraid of David. So Saul was David's enemy continually. Then the commanders of the Philistines came out to battle, and as often as they came out, David had more success than all the servants of Saul, so that his name was highly esteemed. So it's high honor. So Saul made David even more esteemed than his ultimate plan. His ultimate plan was to completely ruin his and potentially end David's life. I mean, he was sending him into the most difficult situations, but he just came out with God's strength, God's power. Just absolutely incredible. I mean, it's sad that it took that Saul, did all that, and even more if I was to continue the next chapters, Saul tries to kill David. He tries to kill him again, and again and again and again. But it says right here, now David fled and escaped, and became to Samuel at Ramah and told him that done him, and Samuel went to live somewhere else. Now he's moved away. And, it just keeps going. Jonathan warns David, they were close, right? And it just continues. David flees to Gath. David at the cave. Saul kills the priest at Nob, and all these other things. David saves the city of, Keilah, and all this stuff. Saul persuades David? Yeah, David spars Saul's life. I mean, death of Samuel. And, it continues. This is the book of Samuel. And David flees to the Philistines. I mean, he goes... It's just such an inspiring piece of text. It's good to know that God backs you for everything if you have His trust, and that's ultimately the importance of this reading. Like and subscribe. God bless, and go to church. See you.